Is anybody saying anything?
sweet girl. My sweet girl Pikes. And I love her. I love her. I'm so glad.
Hi, everyone. This is Jenny with Benchmark. We will get the training started in just a second. If everyone could please make sure that their camera is turned off and that their mic is muted, that will help control the background noise. Kevin will be joining and starting the training in just a second. So again, if you could please make sure that your mic has been muted so that we eliminate the background noise, that would be great. Thank you very much. Looks like Kevin is here. We are still hearing a little bit of background noise. So again, please make sure everyone has their mic muted. Thank you. Kevin, you can start whenever you're ready. This is a 30-minute session on entering assessments, and the recording has started.
I had already started with my mic turned off. I'm sorry. I'm back now.
That's okay. Yeah, the recording has started, so take it away. Thank you.
All right. So hi, I'm Kevin. I'm with Benchmark. I'm the owner of the company, and I'll be doing these trainings for you today. I do want to mention a couple of things real quickly, if I possibly can. When it comes to users accessing the system, we have a session on users tomorrow. If you have any questions about what your users can see, what they can't see, please attend that session tomorrow, because the user process involves program assignments and roles, which are two different things, and they are not connected. One is what you are, one is what you can do, and we'll go over all of that tomorrow. So I want to make sure that we do cover that. The other thing Jenny's already mentioned is keeping the microphones and things turned off. So if you have any problems logging in, et cetera, today, we'll definitely cover that in the user training tomorrow to make sure that that's taken care of. We are on the demonstration site. I'm going to log into the demonstration site now.
Have an affidavit for who?
I'm sorry, what? I thought I heard a question. Sorry. Okay, so I'm going to log into the demonstration site now, and I'm going to assume that you have some familiarity with it, that you have been through through some of the other trainings, you've been in the system before. And I do want to start by going to show you where the information that this session is based on comes from. In the support section, if you click on support in the left-hand navigation, and if you choose downloads, and you scroll to the bottom for the downloads, there is a training, some training material on entering assessments. And if there's not, there will be later today. There is not one on entering assessments, so there will be one later today. But we do, oh, I'm sorry, there it is. And how do I enter post tests? There's information on entering tests for a student who's already in the system and has their pre-test entered. So there is information on entering post tests, and that is available for download. And there's other additional information that you can use in the user manual. So there's several things in the downloads that could be applicable to this session, and if you wanted to go there and download those either now or after the session, that would be great. So we're going to talk about entering assessments at this point. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go and find a student who's in the system. So I use the search feature. And I'm actually going to look up a student that I created in the system during our Enter a New Student session a few hours ago. And I'm going to choose my student. When you get to the student record, however you get there, whether you search for the student search function, or whether you find him in the class list, whether you find the student in browsing, and whatever method you use to find the student, the enter assessment section of the student's profile is found on the right-hand side of the snapshot box. And the snapshot box is enter test scores. If you only want to see what the student already has in the system, you can actually scroll further down to assessment test reporting on that same screen, maximize that section, and it will show that have already been entered for the student. So entering test scores, I'm going to choose enter test scores, and a couple of things tie into this. The first thing is the contact type for the student. The contact type determines what assessments are going to be available for the student. Because the student is ABEASE, you'll only be able to enter, I believe, GAIN and TABE, and there's one other that I can't think of off the top of my head, but there's only 3 options that you have. Another thing you can see once you click the Enter Test Scores link is the next section is required tests. Required test tells you what the student has to take and make in order to achieve a measurable skills gain. So this student already has a TABE 11 math at level 1, and to achieve level 2, they need a score of 449. The student already has a TABE 12 reading with at level 3. To achieve a level 4, they need a score of 536. I scroll further down, I can see the student's period of participation, I can see their assessments, and you may be looking at a completely different student who has no assessments, and you know, it's a completely different situation. But the entry process is the same, whether they have no assessments, 1 assessment, etc. You still go through the same entry screens. So for this student, I'm going to add tests. I click add tests. Since I have already put assessments in for this student, and they are at TABE 11 and 12, the only thing I can work with at this point is TABE 11 and 12. One thing I do want to tell you is if this student is in multiple programs, each program that goes to enter assessments for the student will see exactly the same thing. So if you're trying to enter post-test for a student and he already has a TABE 11 and 12 entered in the system by another program, you can either enter the TABE 11 and 12 post-tests, or you can go in and change the battery to another type of test, and I'll show you that in a moment. But in this case, we're going to enter a TABE 11 and 12 for the student. I know you can't see the drop down because Teams doesn't let you see drop downs for reasons I will never understand. But I'm going to choose TABE 12 Math at this point. And the reason I choose TABE 12 Math is because TABE 11 Math is not available. It forces you to alternate. TABE 11 Reading is not available. The only available options I have in this drop-down which are TABE 12 Math, TABE 12 Reading, TABE 11 Language, and TABE 12 Language. Choose TABE 12 Math as a post-test. I choose the level, score range level. From the score range level, I can choose out of range. I'm not going to choose out of range because those tests essentially, quote unquote, don't count. Choose the test range level. I'm going to choose a score. If you notice, there's a score range beneath this that tells me what the range has to be within. If I try to choose a score outside that range, 87, it will tell me the score has to be between 310 and 536. So I'm going to put a 390. And then I have to choose a test date. Test dates, there are several protocols that go into the entry of a test date. 1, the test date cannot be prior to the student's registration date in your program. And 2, the test date cannot be after today. We have not invented the time travel machine that lets us go into the future and place tests into the future. So you cannot enter a test date that is in the future. So you can enter a test date from today all the way back to the student's beginning of their participation in your program or the beginning of the fiscal year, whichever is later. I'm going to put the last dates. I think we're in January. I'm going to put these. The other third constraint on this test, if a student took a test on January 1st, 2022, and you try to enter a post-test on the same day for that same test, it will not allow you to do that. It does have to be at least 1 day after. We don't enforce the 40 hours here, but we will show you, I'll show you in just a second, that you're going to get a message that says the student has not achieved the required number of hours between pre-test and post-test. When I save the test, it shows up here that the assessment was successfully saved. It adds the test to the student record here. It also adds it to the student record from their student profile page that I showed you in the beginning. If you go to back to the improvement requirements, they're instantly updated, and it says the student now needs to achieve a level 2 at 449. So this test did not make the 449. Now, what happens if I have entered this test and I realize that should have been a 490 instead of a 390? As long as the test has not been approved, I can go and make changes to it. So I go here, I click edit. I need a 490, not a 390. Entered it incorrectly. I'm going to change that and save the test. Once it has been saved, it automatically updates. The score changes to 490. You go back to the top portion again, your required test, now say table 11 math. To achieve a level 3, you're going to need a 496. So it's keeping up with that on a student by student basis. And it happens the moment the test is entered into the student record. If I made a horrific error, if this should have been a TABE 12 reading, or it should have been a TABE 11 language, I can actually delete this test and remove it completely and start over right here. These options are available so long as the test has not been approved, and we'll talk about approvals in just a second. Approvals basically commit this to the student record. If I wanted to add additional tests, I could go to add tests again, add another test. I'm not going to at this point, but I could. All right, so I'm going to, at this point, go back to the student profile. And I want to show you one thing that has not changed. If you notice, the student shows now has an entering EFL, which we established with their initial tests. They also show as being post-tested in the fiscal. But this MSG is not checked, and there's no measurable skills gain listed here. The reason for that is this test has not been approved. I can go in and edit this test, and I could edit it back to a 390, and the student wouldn't have a measurable skills gain. They would still have post-tested, but they don't have a measurable skills gain. So we don't actually calculate and commit the measurable skills gains to the student record or to the report until this assessment is approved. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go, and this is a little sidetrack, but I'm going to go into the approval section so I can approve the test and show you the impact. We have a session on approvals coming up after this that will go over this in more detail. But in order for this to appear, I do need to make sure that it gets approved. So now I'm going to approve the assessment because it is correct. I'm going to submit the record. And now when I go back to the student profile, and go back to the student profile, now I see that the student's measurable skills gain has been added to the record. I also see that they show a measurable skills gain as an EFL gain based on the assessment that I put in on February 1st, 2022. I can go down to their POP history, which is under their provider enrollment record, and I can see that their entering level was ABE1. They have a measurable skills gain as an EFL on February 1st, 2022. It shows that it was an EFL gain. It also shows in which subject area that gain was achieved. So your period of participation history here carries a lot of information related to the tests that you put into the system and the impact that they have on the student record. I'm going to go back now and I'm going to add additional tests to the student record. And I'm going to say that the student, we want to move the student from using TABE. First, let me show you this. There's no link here at this point to edit or delete this assessment because it has been approved and committed to the student record. The rationale behind that, I'll explain very quickly. The rationale behind the approvals being in place are that once this information is committed to the student record, it is aggregated immediately to not only your program's table 4, but to the state table 4. And if the student is in multiple programs, the data is also aggregated to the ability to review data prior to it being committed because they're responsible for that data. We do have the approval process in place. And then the second reason we have the approval process in place is in order to limit the fluctuations when you're looking at your reports, you're looking at your dashboard, you're looking at your data. If we approve the data and make sure that it's correct before we commit it to the record, there are fewer opportunities for that data to change. And imagine if you're at the state level and you're reviewing program level reports, or you're reviewing statewide reports, and data is continually changing. That causes confusion, it causes questions, it causes issues. So we prefer to have this data approved and committed to the record. And if it needs to be changed, there are ways that it can be undone, but you have to actually request that this record be unlocked in order for you to make a change. So that's the gist behind the approval process, and we'll actually delve more into that in the approval section. But I want to show you what happens if you decide that TABE is not working for Mr. Fring, or if you're another program that's come in and you don't offer the TABE assessments, and you want to change from working with TABE to working with another version. If in that case, you would not choose Add Test, you would choose Start New Test Battery. Start New Test Battery. And the first thing that you get when you go to do this, it tells you the student has not met the minimum number of hours in order for additional tests to be entered. You have the option to override. Some of our states actually block the student record at this point. You cannot enter assessments until attendance has been entered. We do not block it at this point. We do allow you to override because we know sometimes you're entering data in different forms and formats, and the attendance will come after, or you have different people doing different functions. So you're going to click OK. And then I'm going to change from TABE 11 and 12. I'm going to change to GAIN. I'm going to choose GAIN Math. I'll choose Form B. And then the score range could be up to 1,000. I'm going to put 850. And then I'm going to put the test date in. Again, the date process follows. You cannot add a GAIN test on top of a math test, on top of another approved test on the same date. So once that date is approved, it would have to be at least a day after. I chose a month after just for demonstration purposes. And I'm going to save this test now. Okay, so now you see here at the top, we've added the GAIN math, and to reach ADE level 6, they need a score of at least 855. The TABE 11 math score is still there. The TABE 12 reading, the score is still there. The one thing that I wanted to show you, however, is that even though this is a math test at level 2 and this is a math test at level 3, they are two different types of tests. You cannot get a measurable skills gain by improving a TABE math level with a GAIN math level. It has to be test to test, subject area to subject area. So a GAIN from a TABE test has to be a TABE post test. A GAIN or a measurable skills gain and a GAIN math test has to be a GAIN math post test. So we have situations where programs will say, I entered a TABE test, they were at level 2. I entered the GAIN test, they're at level 3. Why do I not get a measurable skills gain? It's because even though there was a change in level, that it has to be the test version to test version, and the scores have to change in those versions. So okay, that's a long explanation for saying it does have to be test to test, subject to subject. Once that's been entered, I can continue to add tests. If I wanted to, I could go and add the GAIN. I have the opportunity to add GAIN English. I can add that here. I can add a score. Again, the range is 200 to 1,000. I can put it for 6. As long as I have not approved this March 1st date, I can continue to add tests on that date. So now it's been saved. It's successfully saved as student record. And now I have a GAIN English and a GAIN Math. Same process goes to approve. If you go back to the list here, the GAIN tests are here. It tells you the minimum score required to achieve the next level. It also tells you the hours since the last test. So this is actually on a subject area by subject area basis as well. So if you have a TABE 11 math and you've attended, and that was in February, and the students attended, 300 hours since that point in time, there'll be a 300 here, but this is in March. They've only attended 10 hours since the last test. There'll be a 10 there. So it will continue to tell you in that process what that looks like in terms of how many hours since the last test. Another is, I'm going to delete this. So I can add it. So when I add this additional test, let's say the gain English test, or I delete the gain math. Let's say the gain math test. Let's say the student actually tested at the far end of the test. The English is on level 2, but the math is at level 986. So I know that that test is going to be far above the level 2, and I don't want to test in that subject area for the time being. I only want to work on the student in math, but I do want to record the score so I have it in the system. I can mark this test as being no longer tested, and then I'll show you what happens to that if you do that. I can mark it as being no longer tested here. There's another place in the system that I can also mark as no longer being tested. But if I save that now, it still records the test, and it shows you in the test, testing in this subject has stopped. The subject will no longer appear in the testing alerts. So we have testing alerts that tell you when students should take tests, and I'm going to show you that in the last 9 minutes that I have here. But this gain math test will not show up in the testing alerts for this student. If you go, you can still enter another gain math test, and once you enter that test, the block on the alerts will be removed. So this only temporarily prevents this assessment from showing up in your testing alerts. What are testing alerts? That's the question. Testing alerts are found in student management under the link. When you click testing alerts, this says, show me the students who have achieved X number of hours or more without a test score being entered. You can change this number to anything you want it to be. So if I wanted to change it to 15, show me students who had 15 or more hours but haven't had the test. You'll want to include students who have been registered for less than 30 days. We typically don't include students that have been registered less than 30 days on the alerts because typically you're not going to be testing those students that quickly. So we don't want to clog up the report with information that you don't need. You can choose a particular test type. You can choose only a particular subject area. You can include tests that are skipped over, which is the one that I just did, but I'm not going to. I can include only a specific class. I can include students who've already achieved their HSE. I can exclude students who have achieved a credit diploma. I can exclude students who are at ABE level 6. I can exclude students who already have a measurable skills gain. There's multiple different options that I can do for this report. What it looks like when it generates is it tells me these students are in my program, and I'm a program administrator, so I can see all of this. And we have Charles McGill, who has a language at ABE level 2. His last test was on 1/1/2022. He has accumulated 82.5 hours since his last test. So from here, I can go, we are not testing Charles in language anymore. I'm going to remove this subject area from the alerts. I can choose that, or I can go from here and go directly to his file and enter any tests that need to come up. Same thing, it breaks it down into each individual subject area. So you'll have, and students who have 3 tests, you'll have 3 records because you are able to, and we do it that way so that you can exclude specific tests. We also have Kim Wexler, who is at level 5 in language. I'm not going to be testing Kim in language any longer. I only want to test her in math. I'm going to exclude that, and I'm going to exclude the reading. So now the next time I generate this report, I'll only see the math test. It will only alert me for the math test. It will not alert me for the other 2, no matter how many hours that she has in the system. To have those assessments appear back on this report, all you have to do is enter a new assessment in that subject area, and then it will be subject to being placed back on this report. This is a very valuable tool for you to see which students need to have assessments entered. It's again, like everything else in our system, you can move to a CSV file or an Excel file here. And that way you can download it and use it for whatever purposes you need to. You can change the filter and add different information. One note here also, attendance hours on the day of the test do not count as attendance toward the next test. That seems like an odd thing to place there, but it is one of it is something we actually had to negotiate over multiple phone calls because There are some programs that would argue that, well, the student took the test in the first part of the class. They didn't, so the attendance after that test should count. And then other programs said, no, our students take the test on the last hour of the class. So we don't want the hours to count for that day. So in order, we couldn't have it both ways. We had to make a decision, and the decision that was made based on feedback from all the programs, all the states that we work with, all the different teams, is that any hours on the specific day of the test do not count towards the attendance on the next test. So if a student comes in, takes his test on March 1st, and then stays for 12 more hours the rest of the day, those hours are not going to count towards that cumulative hour total between tests. That's basically, I mean, we only have 4 minutes left, but that is essentially